Welcome, everybody. I'm excited today to introduce you to a very interesting speaker. His name is Sky Nelson Isaacs, and he and I share an interesting topic. He teaches and has written a book, a fine book, on flow and synchronicity. And he's had, in my opinion, Sky is the combination of a lot of perfect factors that come together to make him an expert in this field. You see, Sky was born, I believe, with a genetic predisposition, he believes, to be a 7. And then he had an opportunity with, kind of forward-thinking parents and his experiences to really develop not just this scientific interest, but also his work as a songwriter and as an artist and as a singer. And those kind of things all come together to have a full-brained experience. My name is Linda Frazee, and I'm a teacher of the Enneagram for the last 30 years. I had a similar background to Sky's in a little different way. My mother was an artist. My father was a very well-known writer. And I lived in the mountains of Colorado. And my background was such that I was allowed to be open at the top towards spirituality. And both of those things really informed me and my life and my use of intuition and synchronicity. So I want you to hear all about how Sky got into this because it's a fascinating story. So Sky, can you tell us a little bit about how it was? What was that big aha that got you on the trail of checking out synchronicity?
I had a really big experience that I can point to, especially at times when I'm doubting whether synchronicity is a real thing or not. I go back to high school when I had this friend that I met the first week of high school, and we became really close friends. And she and I never connected at a romantic level, but had remained best friends throughout most of high school. And then we lost touch and then reconnected in the middle of college. And we reconnected at a time when we were about to go away on a trip. I went to Europe to travel and backpack for a semester, and she went to Israel to study for a semester. And it was the same semester. So we had this really vague plan to meet while we were there. And the plan was someplace in between our locations, which seemed like Greece would be a good place to meet, go have fun on a beach there. But we didn't have a really good way of connecting. This is in the 90s. And I spent my time traveling through Europe, backpacking, and didn't really communicate with her while she was in Israel. And she got tired of waiting for me to call. And it was too expensive for me to call because I was traveling on a very small budget. And I figured I would wait until I was close to Greece to call her and say, come on over. Meanwhile, she got sick of waiting for me to call. So she got invited by her friends to go to Paris for the weekend, for Fashion Week. And she initially said, no, I can't go because if Sky calls while we're there, I'll miss his call and I'll have no way to reach him. But she talked on the phone with her mom that night, and her mom encouraged her to go to Paris and enjoy herself while she was in Europe rather than waiting for me to call. And she did. She went to Paris. Now, meanwhile, I realized I had gotten ill while traveling, and it had gotten bad enough as I was in Italy. I had to turn around and head home. Now, my flight was out of Paris, so I just advanced my flight by a few weeks. It was still out of Paris, and I had a flight. I set my flight date for 2 days away, and I got on a train to Paris. So we're both in Paris at the same time, and of course, I had no idea. I went to the Louvre Museum in the one day that I had before I flew away, and the Louvre is, the biggest museum in Paris, really. And I'm walking through the Louvre in the afternoon. I've been there all day. And I'm walking through after lunch, and I'm looking for the Mona Lisa, and I enter this room, and I'm really confused. I just stop in my tracks because there's this person that looks just like Dana standing there looking at this painting. And my brain can't keep up, right? Because I know that she's not there. She's in Israel. That's just a certainty in my mind. So I can't make sense of it. But the more I look, the more it looks like her. And finally, her friend notices me looking and tells her to be really careful. Don't look now because there's this really weird guy staring at you. So we did meet in Paris. And we had about 24 hours before my flight, which we spent together. And she had brought letters that she had written me that she couldn't send because I had no mailbox. And I don't know why she brought them to Paris with her, but she gave them to me, and I read them on the plane home. And this was a continuation of a friendship that had been strong for a long time, had dropped away, had come back. And now, 25 years later, we're married. Mm-hmm. And it took about 10 years for that to happen. And we have a 10-year-old daughter.
Wow.
So what are the chances of that? I've looked at the details of how likely it is to meet somebody in Paris when you're meant to meet them in Greece. And of course, the point is I meant to meet her in Greece what are the chances that we would accidentally both get redirected to Paris in order to make that happen?
And on the same day at the same place. The other
Yeah,
thing that strikes me is what you said about your brain when you saw her. Your brain was saying, okay, that's not her. That can't be her. It just looks like her.
right.
And then, her friend is saying, oh, this is a strange guy looking at you. She turned her back and said, oh, well, let's get out of here as quickly as possible.
Right.
So there's this energetic sort of merging there that happened too. So, wow, that's a great story, Sky. So was that kind of the beginning, or were there some other times before that that you had noticed synchronicity or maybe had overlooked it or ignored it?
Synchronicity in general?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I grew up being exposed to spiritual ideas through my parents who studied um, the Hindu tradition, and also I had studied the Taoist and the Buddhist and mystical Christianity and mystical Islam. Just not officially, but really had read a lot of those texts and been really interested in it as a question, like, why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
What is this world about? And I studied physics because it was the same question I had. How does the physical world come about? And I came to realize sometime later after that these experiences were spiritual experiences. And it makes, like, the teaching I had growing up was that spirituality is a practical thing. It's how do you make sense of your life in a way that makes your life better. And so being able to see synchronicities as the meaningful way in which life comes together to bring meaning into your life. And that's no different from the way God might act in our lives to bring us something important. I don't see it as different. It just depends on the language we want to use. And so I began to explore and recognize these synchronistic experiences as the core of what drove me to inquire about spirituality, and something that could be examined from a scientific point of view, because it's really just about the statistics or the connection, the weaving together of a path through space and time. Like you said, how did Dana and I arrive at the same physical location at the same time in a meaningful way?
Right, I love that. And it's interesting because I had, as I mentioned, I had a similar background in a way, and my parents taught us to use telepathy, my brother and I, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to sit down and do this weird thing. It was like, look, this is a part of our brain that we all have that we can use, and it's an everyday kind of occurrence. It's just that you can't talk to everybody about it because a lot of people will think it's weird. So my father would go downtown in our little town of Salida, Colorado, and my mother would need bread, so she'd just send him a telepathic message, bring home the bread. And he would just bring the bread home, and he'd say, oh, I got the bread, and she'd say, thank you. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, you hit it, you got it,
Mm-hmm.
It was just a regular thing. And they would call us home if we were out playing, because in those days, kids went out and played all over the town.
Right.
We didn't have to stay home or worry about stranger danger. And they just say, it's time for dinner, or we're going someplace, come home, and we just come home. And it was just an easy thing, and I've always been grateful for that, because that started me out at a different way too. So what we're talking about here are some genetic and then some environmental factors that make a big difference in our ability to really accept that these synchronistic things are really true. So now tell us about intuition, Sky. How do you scientifically talk about intuition and synchronicity? What do you see there?
Well, I want to connect that to something you just said, that there's a lot of talk today about flow, the experience of flow. And that's what my book is called, Living in Flow. And I connect flow to synchronicity. When we pay attention to the unexpected experiences in our day that redirect us in some unexpected direction, we allow ourselves to get into flow. We allow ourselves to align with the circumstances that are showing up, and also be assertive to redirect those circumstances in some way. It's this balance between the assertiveness and the receptivity. There's a lot of folks working on flow right now who really treat it as sort of an optimal experience goal. Like, I'm going to play to my optimal level. I'm going to be really assertive. I'm going to be really powerful. And I think that's important. But I think that there's a really important element of dealing with and learning to communicate our emotions. Because I think the things that get in the way of flow, the things that stop us from capitalizing on synchronicities in our life, are the ways in which we avoid having certain feelings, the ways we might avoid being embarrassed or saying something that might embarrass us, or avoid feeling angry at someone only to have it come out in some other way. And I think that these are really practical skills that we can develop. And intuition, I think, is related to that. I think of the word intention a lot because intentions, I think, influence the types of experiences that we want to have. Like I have an intention to have a certain type of experience. And it's the quality of the experience in my body that is the real thing that's happening in life. The real thing that's happening in the world right now is what I am experiencing in my body right now. The sights, the sounds, the feelings, the emotions. And I think to create new experiences, to draw to ourselves meaningful synchronistic experiences, we don't just have to have ideas about how we get there or how we solve problems or vision boards or create a plan, but we need to feel what that feels like. And when we do that, we actually relate to the future possibilities and bring about situations which allow us to have that experience. The experience is this qualitative thing. It's not associated with a specific outcome like me meeting Dana in Paris at the Louvre. Mm-hmm. It's a qualitative experience of me having the connection with someone I deeply care about and building a deep relationship.
Right. I want to step into a number of things you've said there because that was very rich. Because first of all, Sky and I are going to be doing a 3-part series for my online community, which will be offered here shortly, about the different types on the Enneagram and how we block things. And Sky has just made a really important statement here about it's the feelings. If you can't get into your feelings, it's not just the ideas, and it's not just using intuition or synchronicity or the desire for it as a goal, like, and then I will be, or then I'll have, or, I'll get the perfect job because I use this and that. But really, in what I hear is embodying it. And Sky is a 7 on the Enneagram. Now that's a head type. So obviously his background and his work with himself has led him to be in touch with his feelings. That's really important. In the Enneagram, there's 3 centers. There's the head, the heart, and the belly. The head is the more mental type, which as a 7, Sky would be in. The heart is more of the feeling type, which I'm a 4, and I would be in that. And then the belly is the instinct types, the 1 and the 8 and the 9, which if you haven't watched my series yet, you can watch my free 5-part series on the Enneagram and catch up on all of that. But the importance of what I'm saying here is that Sky is demonstrating a more full-bodied experience. Not only is he a scientist, which is a heady kind of thing, he's also into his feelings. He's into his development and his playing musical instruments and singing. That gives you a full body and allows you to be more in your body, Sky. So have you always been aware of the fact that you were in your body more with your feelings than most head types? Well,
my wife would disagree with me that I'm a 7, even though when my mom showed me the Enneagram in my early 20s, and I was on vacation with her one time and I took the quiz. After a few years of pondering what I might be, I took the quiz and I immediately knew, oh my God, this is reflecting who I am. I'm a 7. And it's really resonated for me since then. My wife thinks I'm a 4.
Oh, well, that's
only recently she came up with that theory. So that would be a very feeling oriented part of myself. Mm-hmm. But I do think I'm pretty clear that I'm of 7. I'm open to the idea that I might be wrong or that I might have shifted in some way. But as a 7, I do feel like my emotions have given me almost an intellectual ability to solve some of the things that were in my way before. Like right. The 7s want to resist unpleasant feelings and experiences, right?
Right, exactly.
And I realized at some point that resistance was getting in the way of the things I wanted in my life. Mm-hmm. So that led to the desire to grow and expand my understanding of who I was.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there is an invisible line between the 7 and the 4. For with spiritual development, the idea is that the 7 then can move to 4 and be more in touch with their feelings. And from the standpoint of the 4 going to 7, the more evolved 4 can then move to the 7 and be lighter and have more fun and be, less involved. So that might be a player in this too.
Yeah.
So thank you though, Sky, for that. So my last question for you is, what is it that you think, besides what you've mentioned already about people's feelings kind of getting in the way or not being in their feelings to notice synchronicity, what other things do you think, or have you seen people, how they blocked the synchronicity?
I think that we tend to be attached to how things are supposed to go or how we expect them to go. And I think that that can be a real um, disadvantage in trying to see where a situation is leading. There's a process I use which highlights this. It's the Lorax process. Listen to life, open our minds. This is what I'm talking about. When we have a closed mind, we might not see through our own interpretation of the event. When we can open our mind, then we can reflect and have a moment to really inquire, what are some other perspectives that one could interpret the situation under? What else might this person be intending to say or do? Or what else might this opportunity be leading to? What else might this obstacle be redirecting me towards? And only by opening our minds and reflecting can we be able to do that. And then releasing our attachment to what we thought was going to happen. And then from there, we can act and we become more able to respond to our circumstances. I think of synchronicity as really a theory about how the cosmos we live in is responsive. Mm-hmm. It's not friendly or unfriendly. It's not here to, provide a certain outcome or make us wealthy or make us spiritually powerful. Or it's here to reflect to ourselves who we are, which is a method for making us more spiritually awake and also more successful, I think. But it requires being willing to see the response the cosmos has to each of our choices and take responsibility ourselves for seeing how a certain situation that shows up in life is actually reflecting to us how we're being in the world.
Right. And it's so easy to fall into the more fixed mindset of like being a victim. Like you say, I wanted this and I didn't get it. And so either God is against me or the universe is against me, whatever, or I just can't catch a break, or, whatever your language is for that. And so I think I like your ideas there because it takes a moment to step a little bit further into it. So,
yeah, and I feel like that's really valuable because that mindset that you pointed out of feeling like a victim has an opposite too, which is feeling like we can take control of other people or the situation. As a man, I know that I've really had to learn and wrestle with my desire to fix things. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm a man and a part of the masculine society that we live in. That's one of the tendencies, but I definitely have that tendency myself. I want to solve problems by jumping in and fixing things.
Right.
So I think there's both tendencies, and where I was going to go with that was, as leaders, we are being each called to be leaders by showing up in ways that embody the feelings and the experiences we want to have in the future. Like, we want to create a world that works for everyone. That's sort of one way to put, a goal that we might share. And that doesn't mean having a logistical plan, a set of checklists, but it means actually experiencing the sets of experiences we want to have in the world right now. So if I feel like I'm a victim in my life, it means starting to take on recognize that and heal that and take on a mentality that's more balanced and more healed.
Right. And I'm finding that, of course, in my business as a Enneagram coach and trainer, working with people all over the country, that's what my experience is. Now, also, one of the things when I introduced you, Sky, I forgot to mention that you're also an activist. And so as we wrap this up today, just tell everybody a little bit about what is your focus mostly for your activism.
I've been involved with a lot of political campaigns over the years, mostly in a support role, making a lot of phone calls, thousands of phone calls to people around the country and talking to people about issues who don't necessarily agree with me. And I find a real value in connecting human beings so that we can understand where the differences are and where the similarities are. And I find that even though I live in a place where I agree on a surface level with a lot of folks politically, I actually disagree with the approach, which is very action-oriented. And I agree that action is critical, but I think that any solutions we put forward from a place that doesn't actually understand the problems And those problems may have to do with social justice and racial inequality or bigotry. The problems may have to do with the environment and the way we waste in our minds. It's not about using resources, but wasting resources. And whatever piece of the picture that we're not understanding yet is going to be a weak point in whatever solution we propose. So I think crucial to creating new systems that work for us is to have a mindset that understands where our problems are actually being generated from. And that's generally coming from the relationships that we have with each other.
Right, and perhaps the poor relationship we have with ourselves.
Yeah. And so it doesn't end there, but it definitely has to come from a place of more mutual understanding.
Right. From the Enneagram perspective, it's the difference between being up and out, which is a way of consciousness, being out to the world. What am I going to get? Where am I going to go? How do I get there faster? Versus being in and down, which is more of the Buddhist, as you well know, or the spiritual perspective. And the Enneagram really fits in nicely with that. So as we conclude today, I want to thank you very much for your time and your great suggestions here. And I'm going to give you a minute to make sure everybody knows the name of your book and how to get it. And also, Sky has an online course that he's going to be, that you can sign up for about synchronicity. And I'll have him give you that. And then we'll make sure that that's on our site too, that there's a link for it on my site, which is lindafrazee.com. And we'd love to have you sign up and join my community. And then you can watch the next 3 of these brief little sessions we're going to have here about each center of the Enneagram, and how they block their intuition and synchronicity, and how to move beyond that. So Sky, tell them a little bit about your book and your online course.
Thank you, Linda. So this here is my book, Living in Flow, The Science of Synchronicity and How Your Choices Shape Your World. I come from the perspective of a physicist, but I connect the dots for how synchronicities lead to an experience of flow through the work of people like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and Carl Jung, and lots of stories. It's very accessible, and you can find this book in your local bookstore as well as Amazon or online distributors, but it's distributed nationally. And the course that I lead is based on the book loosely and goes in much more depth with exercises in every segment to take the experience of, I think we go through life trying to ask ourselves, how can I make choices that make my life better? How can I deal with obstacles that come up in my life and not take a victim role? And I provide tools that relate to things like allowing ourselves to really feel our life experiences so that we don't get stuck resisting experiences we don't want to have, and therefore not get to the experiences we do want to have. So I give practical exercises in each of the video modules. It's an evergreen course that you can take at your own pace, and it's intended to be something that you can really integrate into your life. So you can find that at my website, www.theletteruthrivehere.com/livinginflow.
Great. Thank you so much, Sky. I look forward to working with you further and us developing some really handy tools for people who are Enneagram beginners or people who've been around for the longest time and unblocking themselves even more. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I look forward to it.
Okay, bye.